In this episode, Reiko Ohnuma, who is a specialist in Buddhist traditions of South Asia and teaches at Dartmouth College, is going to tell us how she uses mind maps for writing books and articles. Reiko has written a lot of books, including Head, Eyes, Flesh, and Blood, Giving Away the Body in Indian Buddhist Literature. Her second book was Ties That Bind, Maternal Imagery and Discourse in Indian Buddhism. And her most recent book is Unfortunate Destiny, Animals in the Indian Buddhist Imagination. So she's going to show us how what some of the mind maps look like for those books. And she'll address for us then the problem that we all have of what to do when your outline process in thinking of a big project becomes too unwieldy.
Hello everyone, my name is Reiko Ohnuma. I am from Dartmouth College, and the purpose of this video is to show you how I make use of mind mapping software to organize large writing projects. I have used mind maps for the last 2 books that I've written, and I found it incredibly helpful in both cases. And I've even used it for smaller projects like journal articles and book chapters. I find that it's just an incredibly useful tool for organizing your thoughts organically and then keeping them organized as you proceed through a project, even as your ideas are constantly evolving. So let's begin with the question of what is a mind map? I would describe a mind map as an alternative to the traditional linear outline that all of us have been familiar with since grade school. And if we want a fuller description, this is a definition that I've pulled right off of the web, which says that a mind map is a diagram for representing tasks, words, concepts, or items linked to and arranged around a central concept or subject using a non-linear graphical layout that allows the user to build an intuitive framework around a central concept. I think the 2 most crucial words in this definition are non-linear and graphical. So in contrast to the traditional outline, a mind map allows you to visualize a project as an organic whole rather than as a sequential or linear list. So let's look at a very simple example that will show you why this is so useful. If you were planning a vacation in Europe, you could plan your itinerary in a traditional linear outline form like this, and that might work perfectly fine. But you could also plan your itinerary in the form of a mind map, and that would look something like this. So hopefully you can see that the mind map is not only more pleasing to look at, but it also gives you a more holistic vision of the trip as a whole, and it makes it easier to add things, to subtract things, and to move things around. So that's the basic idea, and if you think about taking this idea and applying it to something as large and complicated as a book project, hopefully you can see why this might be useful. In terms of which mind mapping software you should use, there are many of them out there. These are just a few of them. Most of them have a basic free version and then a subscription-based fuller version. Some of them have only a free demo and otherwise require a subscription. But the one that I have always used is called FreeMind, and I like it because it is totally free open source software, and it's also pretty easy to use. I should say that I am not a techie person at all. I'm pretty bad at technology, and I don't use a lot of different applications. So FreeMind, I think, is a good choice if you are not that good at learning complicated new programs. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what one of my mind maps actually looks like. Let me just switch to a different window here. Okay, so this is the mind map that I used to write my second book, which was about motherhood and maternal imagery in Indian Buddhism. And when I first started this mind map, all that I had was this central circle here, which I called motherhood, because I knew that the book was going to be about motherhood. And then initially, as I thought about the major topics that I wanted to include in the book, I just made these items, each topic a different item, branching off from the central node. So this central node called motherhood is called the parent, which is strangely appropriate for a book about motherhood. And then all of these are called children. So these are all children of the parent, which is the central node called motherhood. And likewise, each of these is also siblings to all of the others. And of course, each of these siblings can then become a parent and give rise to further children, and so on and so forth. So this is the terminology that is used to keep track of all the different nesting levels involved in a mind map. Now, this program, FreeMind, has these very useful tags over here. And so you can tag an item any way you want. So as I started to think more, I'm just going to make this a little bit larger. As I started to think more about the order in which I would deal with these topics, I kept track of that by just adding these little numbers. Other things I use, the red X is something that I use when I want to indicate that I have decided not to include a particular topic in the book, but I still want to have it somewhere in the back of my mind so that I remember that it's a possibility. So whenever that happens, I indicate it with a red X. Okay, if we go to any of these topics, let's say we go to the topic that focuses on the Buddha's foster mother, Mahaprajapati. You can see that it has this circle here. This circle indicates that that topic itself has become a parent and given rise to further children. And so if you click on it, you can see that eventually this topic gave rise to subtopics and sub-subtopics and so forth. And again, you can tag each item. So again, the red X means something that I decided not to include ultimately. I like to use this green check mark to indicate that I am done writing about that topic. So it's a good way to track your progress through a particular chapter. What's great about this is that when you're working on a particular topic, you can have this whole thing visible and unfolded right in front of you. But when you're done working on that topic and you're ready to work on a different topic, you can just fold it back up again. And you can just toggle back and forth between having it folded and unfolded. So let's say that I am finished thinking about Mahaprajapati for the day, and now I want to think more about Maya. I would just fold up Mahaprajapati and unfold Maya. And as you can see, this discussion also involved a number of levels and sub-levels and so forth. There are also many other features that I don't use very much, but I can see how they might be helpful. So let's say that you have some minor idea in this chapter and you want to make sure that when you write about it, you remember to relate it back to some other idea from some other chapter. So FreeMind will allow you to connect those two ideas. So if we go up here to this topic, mothers and grief, and we unfold that, you can see that there's one idea here, and I wanted to remember to connect it to an idea from the other chapter, so I told FreeMind to connect them, and so it gave me this nice long curved line that allows me to remember that those two ideas are connected. So there are many other features like that I don't necessarily use very much, but I can imagine that they could be useful. Now, let me show you my favorite part of this entire process. When you are really immersed in the writing of the book and you're trying to organize it and you're trying to think about it as a whole, you can do this. So I click on the central mode. I go up to my navigation menu. I think it is outside of the Zoom screen, but I go up to my navigation menu and I say unfold all. And this is basically the entire book unfolded. And what's really great about this also, let me just make it smaller. So this is the same thing on a single page. So you can get a visual depiction of the whole thing. And what you can also do is make it big and then print out the entire thing on multiple pages of paper. And then you can put them all up in an empty wall of your house and stand in front of it like a crazy scientist. I love doing that. That is my favorite part of the mind mapping process. Let me just quickly show you two more of my mind maps. My third book was about animals in the Indian Buddhist imagination, and this is the mind map for that one. As you can see, I again used a mind map to organize myself, but this one is much, much simpler. For some reason, I just found that I did not have to rely on this as extensively as I did for the other book. Nevertheless, I still found it useful to have this to refer to. And then this is a mind map for an article. I wrote an article about the misbehaving nun Tulananda in the Pali Vinaya. And basically, I wanted to keep track of all the different rules in the Pali Vinaya that involve the misbehaving nun Tulananda. And so even though this was just a journal article, as you can see, it allowed me to keep track of all of those individual rules. So that is how I make use of mind mapping software. And if you have ever had the experience of trying to outline a project in the traditional way and finding that it just became too unwieldy, or that you had to keep revising your outline over and over again, I would encourage you to try using a mind map, and you might find that the process is much easier. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.